Okay, welcome. This is our class on 3 essential skills to master sensitive conversations with parents. I'm Samantha Moe, certified parent coach, and I want to take you right away back to when I started my career as a speech language pathologist, which was 2004. I had just graduated from the University of Minnesota with a master's degree in communication disorders, and I was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I got my first job at the school for kids with autism, ages 3 to 22. I was going to work with those preschoolers all the way through transition years and feeling bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, right? Now, fast forward 6 months, and I've got my hand on the door of the third grade classroom, and my body is filled with dread because it was my time to get Charlie. Now, Charlie was this 8-year-old boy who was known throughout the school for his epic meltdowns. And for me, it was no different. So I remember opening the door, seeing Charlie. He slumped in his seat, looked the other way as if not making eye contact was going to change what was going to happen with me working with him on social skills and using his words to talk things out rather than act things out. And I used all of my skills to transition Charlie from the classroom out into the hallway. No meltdown. It's a good start to the experience. We're getting closer to my office. We're 15 steps away, and hope is building inside of me. We're 14 steps, 13, 12, 11, 10, and it happens. Charlie melts down, almost like X marks the spot. We're right outside the cafeteria doors. And the cafeteria is filled with children and teachers, and he drops to the floor and he's flailing his arms and his legs and he's screaming those things that you never want to hear a child scream at you, especially in public. And I remember like looking over my shoulder, wondering if the teachers were judging me, if his behavior was a reflection on what my skills were. And I remember really looking down at Charlie and thinking, I should know better in these situations. I have so much education. I should know better than the average professional or parent. But I was having this moment of self-doubt. You know those moments, right? Where you're wondering, am I gonna like be able to continue doing this job? What did I sign up for? Is this ever going to get any better? Do I really like this work? Do I really like kids? And like all of those things that our mind spins into when you're having a really tough moment. And when I felt the sweat drip down my back in that moment, I remember going through the Rolodex of like, what should I do here? Should I be really gentle with him and sit on the floor next to him? I've heard about emotional intelligence. Should I do something really firm and show him like I'm the boss, I have authority here, and physically guide him into the room? Should I go get that breathing ball that I've seen other school staff use and teach him how to take a deep breath right now where the ball expands like, but if I would have used a strategy like that, these really amazing behavioral management tools, since I wasn't super skilled at implementing them yet, I know that what Charlie would have done is probably what some of the kids you interact with would have done, which is he may have thrown the ball and possibly at me. So coming back to this moment where I have to make a decision, what do I actually physically do here? And I felt a little bit paralyzed and really sweaty. But ultimately, I decided to just transition him back to his classroom because I had such intense self-doubt in that moment. And he transitioned just fine back to the classroom. There was no disruption, but I still had to do that walk of shame to my office. And when I did, I closed the door. I sat at my desk with the lights off, head in my hands, and I thought, did I choose the wrong job? How am I going to figure this out? How am I going to do this day in and day out? Is my noble goal of helping kids like Charlie make friends and develop self-control, is that worth it to me? Like, what is the cost going to be on me? Now, thankfully, I also heard a voice in my head to counter that self-doubt, and it was the voice of my mom, Cheryl. Now, my parents raised us. I have 4 siblings, so they raised us 5 kids plus 5 daycare kids. And I have cousins with special needs. We were around individuals with differing abilities for my entire life. And I heard my mom Cheryl's voice in my head in the dark space, and it said, Samantha, every child has gifts. You can learn to draw them out. And you know how we do this with that like nice voice in our head, we're like, yeah, 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 yeah. And we're wrestling and feeling uncomfortable and unhappy with our current life choice. But I heard it again really clearly. And her voice said, every child has gifts. You can learn to draw them out. And that was a big turning point for me because it helped me start looking in different fields of expertise. I started reading everything I could find by Dr. Daniel Siegel. He's the leading neuroscientist from UCLA in the field of child development. And he's written a bunch of books, Whole Brain Child, No Drama Discipline, The Yes Brain, The Mindful Brain. And I started piecing together some things that weren't immediately evident, certainly not in my schooling, but also from these different books. I pick up a piece at a time. And if you're a parent or you're a child professional, then you know what that's like. There's a really good strategy and you try it, but it works for a while and not long term. And it might leave you wondering like, well, what should the plan be? Like, is there anything that's tried and true? There is. What I noticed from reading from brain science and play therapy and the sciences of attachment and mindfulness is that there are there's two things that a child's brain needs in order to develop self-control. And once you do this, that they're able to access other skills, how to make friends, how to communicate, how to listen, how to respect boundaries, all of these things that we look for as the grown-ups who are guiding kids to thrive in their childhood. And the key to get their brain into this space is two things. The brain needs to feel calm and it needs to feel safe. And that is the key, and that is the guiding light for today's class when you're going to learn about how to master sensitive conversations with parents. I want you to understand, how do we help a kid's brain feel calm and safe so that you can convey this information to parents, and it gives you tools for when you're working with kids. And if you're working with parents, you're going to start noticing like, oh, maybe their brain needs to feel calm and safe too. Maybe they have these moments similar to the one I had where they're sweating and in freeze mode, or they're talking about, I wish I could break my bad pattern of yelling, but I grew up in a yelling family and I know it's not making things better with my kid. So we're going to talk about all of that here today. And I would like to check in with you. I would like to know what kind of work you do, if you'll type that in the chat box. And if you have any kids, how old are they? I would love to hear that as well. I know we had hundreds of people register for this webinar. There's people from Australia. I'm in the US, so naturally there's a lot of people here because I travel around North America doing keynote speeches on this concept that you're going to hear about today for calming challenging behaviors. So if you wanted to share also where you're from, you're welcome to. I see we have somebody, we were checking in before the recording hit, the UK and Massachusetts as well. So what is your work? What is the work that you do in the world? And if you are a parent who is just listening in, you're allowed. I know I got emails about that too. You're allowed to hear what I'm sharing today, and maybe there will be something that you can share with a helper on your child's team that would be really useful. So I'll monitor the chat box as you're typing that in and let you know that the things we're going to talk about today, let me add a little bit of visual to support you here, is we're going to talk about what's beneath kids' challenging behavior, understanding why parents behave or react the way that they do, because this is how you're going to be able to comfortably and skillfully then bridge the gap between those sensitive conversations and learn how to talk to parents about their kids' behavior and their own reactions. So how to have those sensitive conversations with them. Now, if you're new to me, one of the things that you might not know is that I have created an 8 pillars of parenting program, which is rooted in brain science, and it's for families dealing with children with challenging behaviors. Because some of the typical traditional parenting techniques really don't work for these kids, and you'll understand why as we go through this class today. So the 8 pillars of parenting are displayed here, and they're really designed to help create more peace at home. I know they say in parenting, like there's not an owner's manual or a skills manual like going through driver's education. And I would beg to differ. Once you start taking this approach of calming some of these behaviors and reactions in the first place for kids, you're going to be able to walk your way up the stairs in their brain to get to other skills like conflict resolution and stopping and thinking before reacting. So that's what we're going to be covering here today. And because it's an 8-week parenting program, I'm going to do my best, like I said, to share 3 things with you. All right, so checking in with where you're at on this chat box, in this chat box here. I've got you, Sarah. Okay, thank you. So you have a 4-year-old struggling. Yep, communication, emotional outbursts. Got you. I have a 3.5-year-old at home. So I understand that typical developmental phase and outside of the range of, sometimes outside the range of norm as well when it gets really intense. Okay, early years lead with 182 to 4-year-olds. Wow. Yep. Many disadvantaged. And I'm not sure what you said, what SEND means. So autism spectrum disorder, 2 grandchildren yourselves, 3 and 6, born at the beginning of COVID, lockdown, yada, yada. And I don't mean to say yada, yada to you at all. I get that. The children's mental health is a huge challenge these days. So I know with my kid born in 2020 that even for us as parents and grandparents and child professionals, that we're seeing not just the new to 2024 kindergartners struggling in school, but we're seeing the 3rd graders struggle. We're seeing the middle schoolers struggle. Like there's something that happened with their stress system that we're going to talk about a little bit here today that really does influence their behavior. And I'm hoping that this message empowers you so that we see that there is a way through, that there's a beacon of light to guide us. All right, so let's talk about exactly what's happening in children's brain beneath challenging behavior, whether it's related to a diagnosis like autism or giftedness, that's common too, or even just the strong-willed temperament, or mental health, since we mentioned COVID in here. So Dr. Dan Siegel splits the brain into these 2 sections. We've got this downstairs brain responsible for fight, flight, or freeze, and the upstairs brain that's responsible for more self-control behaviors like solving problems, paying attention, managing our own behavior, like taking breaths. I want you to understand that beneath kids' challenging behavior, the downstairs brain is what's running the show. So if you've heard of fight, flight, or freeze, type in the chat box what you know about it. And they can just be little short snippets, that's fine too. What have you heard about fight, flight, or freeze? Sometimes people's first introduction to this concept is by doing our own therapy as adults. We start looking back at trauma and understanding that we were in protection mode if things were scary at certain phases of growing up. I'll mention this for us as professionals. Sometimes you've learned about adverse childhood experiences. So that's the ACEs study that notice there are categories of exposure that if they occur at young ages, children are more likely to experience trauma and have wiring in their brain to have more of this downstairs brain activation, fight, flight, or freeze, which will influence behaviors and outbursts. And what else have you heard about it? It drives behavior. Yeah, the brain goes offline to deal with the sense of threat. You've got it. So when I'd say the brain goes offline, I would say the upstairs brain goes offline. This downstairs brain is early developing, and it's got our primitive survival mechanism wired in. It's down by the brainstem. So in fetal development, it's very early developing. And so you've heard that this is responsible for if a bear was chasing us through the woods, right? Our heart would start racing, our blood would start pumping, our breath would grow really shallow, and we would try to stay alive. So we would fight the bear, we would flight, which is flee and run away, or we would freeze and we would play dead. Now, most families who are coming to see me with my Mad to Glad blueprint curriculum have a kid with higher fight response. They might be described as defiant, as strong-willed. There might be a special needs diagnosis included in there or not. But this is important to understand because when the downstairs brain is activated, then adrenaline and cortisol flood the brain. And this is why, Allison, like you're saying, the upstairs brain goes offline. It's dealing with a bear chasing through the woods, except that your kid's responding to you as if you're the bear, or to the teacher, or to the helper in your child's life. And this is directly opposite to what we're wanting for children, like I had mentioned with this upstairs brain. And I'll demonstrate that what I call this, because of the adrenaline and cortisol that's flooding, as a parent or a child specialist who's in an intense moment, what I think of is that right now with this kid screaming at my feet, there's fire in the brain. And this is really helpful information for you as parents, grandparents, and child professionals, because it gives us the intention or the knowledge in that moment to keep it really simple. Now, being a good Midwestern gal from Minnesota who has done a lot of camping and setting up and putting out bonfires in my days, I know that if a fire is raging out of control, I want to put out the fire, not add fuel to the fire. And some of the things that add fuel to the fire for us as professionals are these well-meaning upstairs brain skills. So imagine yourself, if you've ever been in a situation with a kid like Charlie or one of these moments, have you ever said anything like I said back in the day, we're like, hey, Charlie, what could you do right now instead of screaming, I hate you at the top of your lungs? Right? So I was trying to use problem solving. Or I was using the eye contact cue. So I'd be like, pay attention, Charlie, look at me when try, as if the eye contact really meant that his brain was in a space to listen. I caught myself doing that with when my kid was a toddler a couple years ago too, like, Mason, mommy's talking to you. It doesn't stop the flailing or the screaming or put out fire in any way. So that means these are the skills we want to stay away from when there's fire in the brain. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't teach kids to make eye contact, pay attention, repair if they've said mean words. But what it does mean is in the moment with fire in the brain, it's not going to sink in and you're wasting your breath. And I think our work is challenging enough professionally and as parents that whenever we can save our breath and just stop with a strategy that's not working, it's helpful so that we don't get so burnt out. And then the other upstairs brain skill that is really challenging to implement in the moment when there's fire is the behavioral management strategy. We personally have the cozy spot at home. It's a sheepskin rug. It's a soft space that we bring our child to when there's a meltdown, there's kicking and flailing and trying to run away and all of that stuff that's typical with kids that have a strong-willed temperament and personality. And when I try to acknowledge in the moment, like, this is where we stomp our feet, or these are the things that we can hit, and this is where we put our body, and this keeps us safe. Like him actually trying to look at the pictures on the wall or do the breathing ball or stomp his feet in that safe spot are really hard for him to access and for me to shape. So that's not what I'm going to coach you through today. I'm not going to talk to you about de-escalation strategies. I would say that my specialty is pre-escalation. How do we prevent fire in the first place? And the catch is, it's not about preventing the fire by controlling kids' behavior. Nope. The way that we prevent fire in the brain is by influencing kids' behavior. So there's something else in our brains that's really important that are called mirror neurons. And mirror neurons, like a mirror being held up, reflects the state another person is in. So if we're trying to influence our kids' mirror neurons so that pathways get formed, just like walking on a grassy trail through the woods or like taking a hike up a hill, when there's more and more people walking that path, then that path becomes a dirt path. The grass fades away. And that's how neural pathways work. If you grew up in a family where you had a yeller parent, you might find yourself yelling at your kids. Or if you're a professional, you might find yourself like me, where there was a parent who yelled in my family of origin, where I wasn't yelling in the school setting that I was working at, but my blood would boil and I would feel so much rage. And that was at the young age of 22 after I'd graduated with my master's. So I had a lot of practice before I had my kid at the age of 38 with managing the fire in my own brain so that I could reflect and mirror to the child what it was that was going to be appropriate behavior. Now, when we practice calm, I'll share a mantra with you. Oh, it's over here in my fridge. Maybe I'll grab it if you want me to at the end of today's class. Let me know. I'll go grab the visual. But the way that we want to start is we want to have a mantra for ourselves so that we can influence calm and calm the fire in our own brain. Thank you for that heart emoji, Sarah. It's very sweet. And the mantra that we have is calm body, calm voice, calm face. And that's because when we're working with kids, we can be like, on to the next thing, on to the next thing, or on to the next kid, or stressed from something that happened for us that day or the week and how busy and chaotic it has been. So we want to really catch ourselves to influence children's neural pathways so that they develop a calm pattern in their brain with you. And that's really cool because kids are like ducklings and they like imprint on the adult around them. So even if as a child professional, like you might have heard, I posted this on Instagram earlier this week. I was sharing a message about how somebody would always say to me like, oh, you're like a child whisperer. And I thought, well, yeah, because I'm practicing calm. My calm body, so I'm not fists clenched by my side, like get up right now, which we might do if we're embarrassed in the grocery store and our kid's screaming. Calm body, calm voice. So if there's an edge in the voice, you might find people say to you as a child professional who's practiced a lot, like, oh, your voice is so soothing. It's so calming to be around you, because your voice and the vibration of it will also influence if we're triggering, I'm the bear chasing you, right? And if there's an edge to it, calm body, calm voice, and calm face. So this is where I see parents and professionals alike kind of trip up because we're like, well, I'm not yelling and my fists aren't clenched by my side, but then the face is really kind of scrunched up or looking firm and rigid instead of warm and open to help a child feel receptive, like it's safe to be around you. So I'm sharing all of this because I said at the beginning, there's two things a child's brain needs in order to develop self-control, and that's the brain needs to feel calm and safe. So if your goal is self-control with children, then calm and safe is what you want to practice so that their brain is getting that feedback. It's getting that information. Now, is this enough? No, it's not enough. If it was, that would be my TEDx talk. Just calm fire in the brain. Instead, I created my 8 pillars because once you calm the fire in the brain, now we want to build on that and add in more pieces so that kids can feel calm, but they can also be guided. Like we want to also have authority and teach them that we get to have boundaries and structure because that's going to help them thrive too. And I'll talk more about that as we go on here. So before or as we're going to move on to this next strategy, knowing we're talking about like why do kids act up? Why do we react the way that we do? We always need a dose of compassion when we're working with parents a lot or we're a parent ourselves. We're going to still talk about that. And then I'm going to talk about some scripts to bridge the gap and talk about both of these things because they're sensitive, right? And I want you to walk away feeling like you know how to guide parents and you can partner with them. Or if you want more training, I'm happy to share that with you too. There's some exciting things happening. Okay, so if you're willing to experience fire in the brain, I'm going to do a little exercise right now. It's 30 seconds. And what I want you to do is I want you to close your eyes if you're able and willing. And it just helps you to like make your space smaller and notice what happens in your body as you're listening to my voice. So for those of you who are ready, and you know the drill if you're driving, eyes open, obviously, but kind of pay attention to what's happening in your body. No, no, knock it off. Stop that. Ugh, every day you do. I said no. Why do you no? Open your eyes. Starting phrases with no is what I call a fire starter. So when you understand that challenging behavior is continuing because there's this cycle of fire in the brain, where we have a lot of influence in raising and guiding children is by avoiding these fire starters because it adds fuel to this intensity. It adds adrenaline and cortisol, even though you're might be trying to keep them safe, do classroom management, teach them a lesson because it's your job to teach them a lesson. It's really important to understand this fire starter, starting phrases with no. And there's 11 fire starters. So let's explore this one for a little while, and then I'll put a link if you want my free PDF. It's just on my website with these fire starters. So if you're willing to type in the chat box, what did you notice in your body? There's 4 common responses. I'll send it, Roseanne, I promise. Where did you feel the stress? So we have stress in the body. I bet we'll have at least 3 of the 4 responses. If you're willing to type, listeners who are here. Yeah, so sometimes, got you. You felt tight in your chest. Yeah. Tension and irritation from your body core. And that's really common. The tightness in the chest, the tension in the shoulders, even the like irritation from your body core that you wrote, or agitated. I saw that just come through. I tend to get butterflies in my stomach, or I feel nauseated. So all of those are one of the common responses, that there's physiological changes. Physiological is just a fancy way of saying things inside your body change. So your heart beats faster, your muscles change, they tense up. Your breath might grow shallow. I did this workshop to 100 parents a week ago, and a dad said, oh my gosh, I kept like holding my breath every time you said a version of no. Yeah, I see you, Zara. Stress in your stomach. We want to be aware of this because if you have a kid with high energy or high physical needs and low impulse control, again, either because of special needs, personality, typical age, which we're definitely dealing with in our household right now. It's common for a 3.5-year-old to have more fire in the brain during this developmental stage. We want to refrain from saying no, just like early childhood teachers might teach. Who said they were the early lead? I didn't. Allison did. Okay, got you. Right? Like, so in early childhood, maybe you can type for us. There's a really common replacement strategy. So instead of telling kids what to do, which is considered negative reinforcement, we want to teach them something opposite. And I'll see if Allison wants to type that, or anybody else. And it makes sense to me why we got stuck in this pattern. I mean, yeah, if you're working with 180 kids, yeah, if you're working with children who have trauma backgrounds, and children, when I say children, I use that loosely. I would even call middle schoolers and teenagers children. So instead, we want to reframe it positively. Of course, you knew that. We want to tell kids what to do. And this sounds really simple, but I want you to understand the importance of it and why. Because we can talk about positive reframe and positive reinforcement and positive psychology to parents, but when you really have this experience of, oh, snap, like Samantha or this teacher or this clinician, they took me through this 30-second exercise, I could feel myself flinching. That's one of the reactions. I could feel my heart racing. Another common reaction is retaliation. So if you're somebody who's not afraid of conflict, you're like, I'm game for a fight. You might be like these kids with challenging behaviors in some ways, like you have that fight response. So you might be geared up like, oh yeah, don't tell me what to do. You might want to fight or retaliate against me. You might have more of a pleaser personality, like I have been working through my entire life to have lots of it. But I call, like, if you have more of a pleaser personality and you tend to internalize people's behaviors and words towards you, you might have the wilting response, where I've seen kids as young as 4, when asked, well, why'd you get the bad color on the behavior chart? And they say, well, I'm just a bad kid. Oh, you're at the principal's office again? What happened? I don't know. I guess I'm just bad. If you're picturing some of those preteens, that might be how they say it. So we want to really become aware that if we're starting phrases with no, we're triggering fire in the brain. So instead, we can tell kids what to do. And I loved this study because when we're working with kids and we realize how much we can influence them, we can do shame spiral pretty quickly for ourselves, right? Like we can get down on ourselves. I can feel kind of dark and negative. I feel that way, even as a parenting specialist, when I am scrolling through social media and there's another specialist saying something like, watch this video, how this parent was dealing with their kid who was screaming, and here's what the parent should have done instead. Let me give you the play-by-play. And it's like, we're so devoted to giving our kids and the kids we're working with the best and doing, like, giving them a childhood that they can look back on and we can feel proud of, and we can feel guilty really quickly. So know that the study I'm sharing with you is because I get it. I have those feelings too. And that puts us into more, depending on your response to the no exercise, it puts us in more fight. Don't tell me what to do, I'm fine, which can delay us seeking help. It can put us into flee mode, like I just can't deal with this, I'm going to be an ostrich and put my head in the sand. Or it can put us into freeze mode of just like, I'm overwhelmed, I've already read 10 books and now this specialist, and do I need that one? And then we just can't take action. So the study said that by the time a child is a toddler, 2 years old, they hear a stern directive or a correction every 9 minutes. Okay, got it. So toddler, that makes sense. That makes sense that my kid's trying to climb on this 4-tiered toy, what is this called? Shelf that I've got in the corner over here. And it's now bolted to the wall. Like, that makes sense that when I come around the corner and I see him trying to climb on it, I'm like, no, 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 no. That makes sense, right? Or there's a spinning chair right behind me. So that makes sense. If he's climbing on it behind me, I'm like, stop that. Don't do that. I want to keep him safe. But what happens is when kids have challenging behavior, we neglect to fade the stern directive or the correction. And there's so much ADHD. There's so much aggression. There's so much oppositional defiance disorder and children's mental health concern right now. So what does that mean for us when we're raising our kids, when we're working with kids? It's the invitation I'm offering you is to become intentional with your words and to find yourself telling kids what they can do. You can put your feet on the floor. You can climb over here on the soft couch, knowing that there's something soft underneath it. You can sit on the chair. You can spin in circles to make yourself dizzy by standing on the floor. And we think about this sometimes with little kids, and we forget about it with the 9-year-old. We forget about it with the 12-year-old. Over the holidays, when my kid was, over the Christmas holiday, my kid was 14 months old, and he was walking around all the time going like this. And we're like, why does he do that? And it looked like the shrug, right? Like the, I don't know. I don't know what you want. I don't know, mommy. And my mother-in-law said to me, like, where did he get that? Because we were seeing in that early years, right? You're watching your kid and you're like, oh, I see they're doing the exact same thing that we do at home. And I'm like, I have no idea. And my husband is really low key and grounded, and I have higher expression and affect growing up in a family with of 7 people. And I remember I was taking a ham from the garage that was cold. We were keeping it cold in there because we ran out of refrigerator space. There was like 30 family members coming over. And I'm walking from the garage into the house, and my mother-in-law says, where are you going to put that ham? And I'm like, I don't really. And she goes, there it is. That's where Mason got it. So remembering not to take this as if you're a person who's yelling or getting trapped in making kids feel guilty or putting them down or using sarcasm or over teaching and over correcting them. It's not meant to make you feel guilty that kids are having some responses and behavioral reactions based on how we're influencing them. It is not meant to shame you. It is meant to say, wow, can I have a growth mindset? Can I do something differently? And for those of you who are here as professionals, because you want to influence parents, your come from must be non-judgment. It must be. It has to be. We have to have a safe space for us as parents because we want to help our kids. And so that's more on that later. All right. So if you want all of those 11 fire starters, I put them in the chat box right there. It's on my website. If you're listening to the replay, we'll put it in the link, but it's from samanthamo.com. You'll see the .com/professionals, and that's at the bottom of the page. All right, not to belabor this, friends. Let's keep moving forward. And if you have questions, post them along the way here. All right, so we've got the starting phrases with no. Let me bring some visuals back in. We understand that what's happening beneath kids' challenging behaviors is that there's fire in the brain. We understand responses are tension, wilting, resistance, retaliation, or even tuning out. I had neglected to say that. So tuning out is, we think about this for the teenagers, like, whatever, not listening to you. But I've seen this with kids who have really stressful home environments, like, hey, come and eat dinner. And that, like, one kid comes running and the other is coloring, and they might be only 3 years old. And so, you have to like touch them and like get their eyes to make sure that they heard you and then say it again. So I'm like, touch cue, visual cue, auditory cue, like all of these educational pieces, right? But tuning you out is a self-protection mechanism if there's been stress, if there's stress in the brain wiring, possibly because of neurodiversity, if there was medical stress early in life and the kid was needing to have interventions to survive and they were in like this little bubble on their own, um, in order to have this intervention, if there were injuries, if there were other ACEs and adverse childhood experiences. We can see this with little kids. And then we can see this like tune out response as well for kids who go through bullying or who are in scary environments at school with their peers. We know that all of that can create a tune out response too. Like, I am just going to stay safe in my little world here. I'm going to withdraw. I'm not going to connect. I'm not going to reach out. The good news is all of this can shift. Okay. So as we're talking about this shifting, and you can see this QR code if you wanted to scan that free PDF on 11 reasons of fire starters, what's beneath behaviors. So also, then let's talk about how do we help parents? Okay, so we understand what's happening with kids, and now let's understand what's happening with parents. So to talk about parents, I'm gonna tell you a story where all of these parents were well-meaning and I missed the boat. Okay, I've been doing this work for 20 years. In 2011, that's when I left my autism specialty speech therapy career and became a certified parent coach and a life coach. And since then, I've worked with nearly 1,000 diverse families in my parenting curriculum and certified 60 professionals to teach my curriculum on site, because I believe that there should be a Mad to Glad parent educator on site at every school, occupational therapy clinic, play therapy clinic, chiropractic offices where parents are taking their kids for challenging behaviors, and a bunch of these holistic resources. So when I left the speech therapy role in 2011, I remember working with a dad. I was working with his son, Drew. He was 5 years old. He had autism. And I would create this home program so Drew could become verbal. And one of Dad's greatest goals was that his kid would make friends and be invited to a birthday party, and instead of having meltdown behaviors. And we were making great progress in the outpatient pediatric clinic. And so I'd create this home program, and Dad, I'd say like, hey, Dad, how'd the home program go? Because I knew that 1 hour a week or 2 sessions a week wasn't going to influence this child as quickly as Dad could if he even focused 10 minutes a day on the home program I created. And he started by saying like, I can't get my kid to do this home program. So I'd lay in bed at night, how can I modify it? And I'd think about it, and I'd put a lot of time and energy and heart thinking about it, and I'd modify it and convey it to Dad. And I'm like, can I show it to you? And he's like, I got to get groceries, but just tell me at the end in the lobby and I'll come back after the end of my kid's session. So I'd work with Drew and tell Dad what it was. And then after a few weeks, I'd check in like, so how's the home program going? And Dad changed his words from, I can't get my kid to do it, to my kid won't do it. So I knew this flag was a flag now for something in the relationship. He won't do it. I'm like, okay, so how do I break through this obstacle? But I wasn't a behavior specialist or a parent coach yet. I didn't know how to bridge the gap between what I was doing as people were calling me a child whisperer to now like whisper into Dad's ear, what could he do differently? Because he's the one who matters here in this relationship with his kid. And so I'm racking my brain about it. And finally, I quit my job, and I'm in my last week of work, and Dad and Drew come in for the last time. And I said, can I ask you an honest question? He said, yeah. I said, you used to tell me that your kid couldn't do you couldn't do it. And then he wouldn't do it. And just last time you told me you just didn't do it. Why? I want to understand, what am I missing since I'm not a parent yet? And he said, well, the reason I don't stay in on your play and speech sessions is because I need to go to the grocery store across the street so that when I pick Drew up afterwards, I can put dinner on the table for him and his 2 brothers. And I have chronic leukemia. And so that's all the energy I have for the day. I have to use my time to the best way that I can. And I love my kid, but I physically don't have the resources or the capacity to do some of these things that you're asking me to do. And you know how I felt when you hear a parent who's honest and vulnerable with you, like a shot to the heart. I was like, oh, here I was feeling frustrated and complaining in my head at night and judging him. And really what was happening was it was too much. He really needed to lean on me as the specialist at that phase in his life. A year ago, a mom came to me to check out. I do a free monthly webinar for parents raising intense kids. So I'm doing this free webinar. And she asked me a question. She says, I've been following this empathy parenting approach. It's different than fire in the brain. It's more like, she said, when my kid is having a hard time transitioning out the door in the morning, and he's screaming and throwing his shoes, she said, I sit down next to him and I label his feelings like, I see you're really mad. And she's like, and I tell him, like, I know you're upset about this and transitioning is hard and you don't want me to pay attention to your 2-year-old brother. You want me to get you dressed. And like she was using all this empathetic, like empathy driven language, which is positive. That's a positive thing to do. And yet she said, it takes us 45 minutes every day. We have a great routine, except part of the routine always has to include that 45-minute meltdown. I have to build it in every single day. And I said, well, how long have you been doing that? And she's like, since before he was 2. I was like, oh. And I said, well, how's that feeling for you? And she said, I feel terrible because I'm doing my best and I keep listening to these podcasts on emotional intelligence and being gentle, but they keep telling me, dig deeper, hang in there, mom, it'll change over time. And I'm like, did anybody ever tell you about positive discipline? And she looked at me and she was like, I can discipline my kid. And so then we had this whole conversation, like, what does discipline mean? And is it punishment? It's not. All you all know that, right? Like positive discipline is how do we teach our kids to shape their behavior, which helps their brain feel calm and safe. Positive discipline helps a kid's brain feel calm and safe. And so if you're listening to this topic today because you want to bridge the gap with parents, sometimes parents don't know if they've been taking a gentle approach, which is super noble. Again, no judgment on that. There are very gentle things I do with my kid as well. And when you have the container of boundaries and positive discipline to teach a kid, hurting is never going to be okay. We need to create a safe space for your body, for my body, for your sibling's body. For those of you who are working in group settings, we know it has to be created for other kids in the setting as well. Like, I want you to know that sometimes why are parents acting the way that they do is because they're trying to parent differently than the way that they were raised, but they weren't given the whole picture. The same thing can be absolutely true on the flip side. Well, I grew up, I was a rule follower. I ended up great. Okay, well, how's your relationship with your parent? Well, my parent yelled and my parent, did the word you're not supposed to say out loud in public anymore. I'll say it, right? Like, well, my parents spanked. It's like, how'd you turn out? Fine. Okay. How are you different than your kid? Oh, that's true. I was a rule follower. Okay. How's your relationship with your parent? Great. Okay. Well, how's your relationship with your kid who has a different personality than you? Not great. Feels terrible. Okay. So this allows us, when we understand that sometimes parents have knowledge, but they might be missing a piece. This is one of the reasons I'm passionate about having a Mad to Glad certified professional on site at every school and childcare center and clinic and therapy center so that you can teach these 8 pillars, so that you can bridge the gap. And when you know 8 tools, you can build one on the other. So we're practicing calm. We're practicing avoiding fire starters. These are downstairs brain skills, and you can explain them to parents in that way. And then we work on relationship. We work on things like, how do you play with a kid so they feel like the boss? Because if you use special play strategies and they feel like the boss, Allison probably knows this too. I bet a bunch of you do. If a kid feels like the boss in play, that builds not happy stress chemicals, happy chemicals, dopamine, bonding, oxytocin, serotonin. Laughter alone elicits dopamine. So now when it's time to transition, we've decreased stress, we've increased happy, and now the kid's like, oh, I can listen because I'm more flexible. There's less stress in my brain. And so these are, when you're teaching parents the strategies the thing I want you to understand today is link it to the brain, link it to the fire in the brain. Is it adding fuel to the fire? Is it not? Link it to how kids are influenced, link it to those mirror neurons. All of that language can be really powerful perspective shifters. So finally, so I said, why are kids acting the way that they do? Why do parents act the way that they do? Sometimes misinformed, sometimes missing a piece, sometimes they need a smaller step. And I'll share a personal story with you. Okay. So sometimes the reason parents behave the way that they do is because they're desperate. And I have a really not too long ago memory of feeling desperate when my kid was born. So August 2020. And when he was born, after 30 hours of posterior labor, so back labor, my husband is a neurological pediatric and family chiropractor. So we're crunchy. If you haven't heard that term before, crunchy is like holistic, and we like to, you know, eat natural foods and avoid dyes and reduce sugar. And we don't have a TV in our home. Like we're living simply. We take walks in the woods, our kids in a nature preschool. So we planned this home birth supervised by a midwife and a doula, and it was successful. And yet when our kid was born, the first cry that came out of his mouth was described to us as a pain cry. So as Mason was crying or shrieking, we would say, my whole insides turned. And I hear about people who get that rush when their kid is born and they've got like all that bonding and, you know, they're feeling like a rock star. I felt exhausted and scared. I felt terrified for a couple of weeks after he was born, and I didn't know why I was feeling that in my body. And so as we're working on nursing and such, we were having a hard time with latch and with him gaining weight. And the midwife would come and check on us in our condo because, oh yeah, I had broken my ankle. I'd fallen and broken my ankle when I was 34 weeks pregnant. And so I couldn't navigate the stairs to the clinics. I had just graduated from a knee roller to crutches right before Mason was born, which was like the marker that allowed me to have a home birth. And the lactation consultant came to our house because a midwife was like, your kid's losing weight. And I know it's normal to happen in the first week of life, but he's losing it at a really rapid pace. And so I was devastated, and he was screaming around the clock. And we found out later he had broken his collarbone at birth. So, you know, you carry a baby and you've got to put a onesie on, and nursing, like everything hurts that collarbone that's been broken. So Mason's losing weight. We call in our second lactation consultant. Nursing's not working. We're using donor milk. I'm doing triple feeds. Some of you understand what that means. I'm spending time milking 90 minutes out of every 2 hours for weeks. And finally, at the 2-week mark, the midwife looks at us and she said, your son has gone from the 86th weight percentile to the 10th weight percentile. In 2 weeks, boom, down to the failure to thrive range. So she said, you have to do something different. I said, I'm going to call one more lady in. So Liz came in. She worked at the local hospital, had 4 special needs kids of her own at home, worked 12-hour shifts. And you know what it's like as a new mom. She came into my bedroom, sat with me at 7 in the morning before her shift started. I'm in my bathrobe only, in tears. And she sees this crutch on the side of my bed. And she says, Samantha, just like that crutch that supports you, like I see the strategies you're using. Some of them are good. Some of them you're not doing right. And some of them you're missing. I'm going to teach you those. And she said, like that crutch, you can lean on me until you have the confidence and the knowledge to do this on your own. And she was right. After the course of our time working together, and I'll share a picture of Liz here, she helped our son thrive. And I had fewer tears, and I started thriving as well as a mom. It took some time to move through the birth trauma for both of us. And I share this story because sometimes what we don't remember is we don't remember what it's like to feel desperate. And when parents are struggling with their kids' behavior, you might be one of the few people that they tell about it. You might be one of the few people who pick up on that. Now, Liz guided me through such a tough time, and I'm forever grateful to her. And this was a picture of our family, my family picture from just some months ago. But I wonder, like, as a child specialist, what do you want parents to say about you? So remembering that as you're understanding what's beneath kids' challenging behaviors and parents' behaviors, It could be tools. It could be that they need support. Everybody needs a village. There's not much of a village when it comes to raising or supporting parents these days. And it's why I created the Mad to Glad community, so parents can learn the tools online in an 8-week setting, and then they can get support and hear from other parents. And I'm hoping that that's something that you want to do too, that you want to use some of this language that you've heard here today. And when you're talking to parents, so I'm inviting you, that if you have a heart for parents, that you consider becoming Mad to Glad certified. Now, this is a standalone webinar. Like, I hope that you have tools that you can use immediately. And I'm going to share some scripts that you can use with parents right off the bat, again, to talk about something like fire in the brain and talk about how parenting is feeling for them, because our world is desperate for it. The incidence of ADHD and autism and children's mental health and our own difficulties with mental health as grown-ups is so escalated right now that they need a guide who believes in parents. There's so many places for kids. I was talking to a mom, she's like, I was talking to an occupational therapist, and she's like, there's school teams, school counselors, IEPs, OTs, chiropractors, there's all these places for kids, and where is the space for parents? And we can really be and create that space. So if you're talking to parents about some of the things you've learned here today, here's what I would encourage you to ask them. I would encourage you to ask them, when they talk about challenging behaviors, to ask them, may I share what I think is beneath behaviors? That's your first sentence starter. May I share what I think? So that instead of emailing parents and saying something like, I have to report your kid hit again today. I have to report your kid got the 3 red colors on the behavior chart in a row, so I'm mandated to send an email and track it. Instead of it missing heart, and instead of it missing hope for the parent, I encourage you to say something like, may I share what I think is happening? And you can talk about the fire in the brain. I think when we're seeing hitting or shoving or biting or pushing over a desk, I think what that is fire in the brain. And talk to them about fight, flight, or freeze, and that their kid has a stronger fight response. And say one thing that you're working on. And maybe you're working on the calm mantra. And maybe you could ask them, what do you notice adds fire? What fuels the fire at home? What does fire at home look like? And you might have parents who want to partner with you say, I'm a yeller. Or they might blame their partner, right? Like, oh, this one over here, they're a yeller. Or, yeah, I know, the discipline feels too harsh. Now, I think sometimes when it comes to talking about parents, depending on what our expertise is, we feel like that's out of my scope of practice. But really, if you're a child specialist or a family specialist, I would say it's just maybe outside your zone of comfort. You're allowed to talk to parents, just like you would ask a friend. We live in a condo, so I would ask my neighbor, like, hey, how's it going today? Oh, it's really, really full and busy and da 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 da. And somebody hit my car. Oh, how are you feeling? You can ask parents how they're feeling. And does that take time? Yes. Does that open the door to partnership? Yes. And so sometimes, becoming a certified parent coach was my greatest career decision, because parents know they're coming for support to help their kids. They're not coming for me to fix their kid. And so I wanted to share that with you, because I have an upcoming cohort for certification, and I would love for you to be part of it. And I'll talk about how it works. If you want to stick around and ask questions, you're welcome to. I'll also send an email to you shortly, so that if you want to read about it and ingest it more privately, you're welcome to do that too. It's a program that I run in March every year, side by side with my parenting program. So my parenting program kicks off in March, and the Friday before that, my certification program kicks off. And what you do is you master the 8 pillars of parenting in your first 10-week phase. So we have Friday training calls for the professional. You master the tools, you get practice teaching the information. There's a facilitator guide and slides and a parenting workbook, so that you know how to teach the material, and you get a gifted seat in my parenting cohort, so that you can listen to Parent Coaching Live. You can hear the transformations that parents have when they get the right information in a village with that heart support with other growth-oriented parents. So if you're interested in exploring that, I'll pull up a slide shortly here, but I want to end with a story for those of you who do need to leave at top of the hour here. And the invitation stands that if you're here as a parent, you're welcome to reach out to me as well if you want to talk about my programming. So when I was 6 years old, I remember a phone call coming in, like, "Bring." My mom answered, "Hello, this is Cheryl." "What's that?" "Yes, I will tell Sammy and we'll be right there." My mom hangs up the phone and looks at me. "Samantha, your kindergarten teacher just told me that one of those duck eggs that we thought were frozen for your classroom experiment, one of them was warm and one of the ducks lived. Your janitor, Mr. Matson, like peeled open the egg because it felt warm and there's a baby duck inside and your teacher wants to know if we'll take it home and see if we can help it live." So we walked across the street to the elementary school with this cardboard box in my hand and we collect this duck from my wonderful teacher. And I promptly named the duck Webby for his webbed feet. And we walk home and set up a little incubator with a what's that called? A light bulb. And we put it on the bathroom to sink countertop. And what happened when I was a little kid is I would have nightmares. And so my mom, we grew up in a faith-based family, she would teach me to wake her up and we would say a prayer. She'd take me to the bathroom. I'd go potty, wash my hands, take a drink of water, and she would hand me the medicine dropper right next to Webby's makeshift incubator. And she'd say, "Okay, now give Webby 10 drops." And I'd scoop up some water with the medicine dropper and I'd go drip, drip, drip. And we couldn't see the change in Webby day by day, but pretty soon she got stronger and she could hold her neck up and she got bigger and she graduated to moving out of this little box to a cage that my dad built for her in the backyard of our suburban house with no fence. So he built this cage. And my mom said that when I was taking naps sometimes in the summer, Webby would be playing with the kids out there who'd be throwing balls and dragging sticks through the yard, and she'd be quacking obnoxiously. Webby was a boy. I keep mixing up because it sounds like Webby's a she. Even I forget now as a grown up. So he would be quacking obnoxiously. He'd be like, quack, 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 quack. And my mom said I would wake up and my hair would be like wispy and I'd be rubbing my eyes. I'd be all bleary. And I'd come out into the backyard and Webby would follow right behind me like a duck. And she'd be like, or like a dog. She'd be like, quick, 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 quick. And she'd follow me and her quack changed to a more loving quack. Who knew, right? And I share this story with you because even if we can't see the changes, it's like you've got this medicine dropper with kids every single day. Drip, drip, drip. And I thank you for sharing some time with me here today. I hope that this has been useful because you're nurturing kids and you're supporting them, and every drop you drip matters. Even if you don't get to see the changes, especially if you're working with the little kids, they move on and they have other teachers and other helpers in their lives. Knowing that that matters. I'm so glad I believed my mom's voice really, when she said, every child has gifts. And I believe the work that you're doing in the world is a gift to kids. I believe you can draw out their gifts and what you do matters. And if you choose to support parents in this way, you can help them offer the greatest gift to their child, which is them showing up in a way that's influential and positive with empathy plus boundaries. And now that really changes communities. So thank you for sharing time with me today. I will open the lines if anybody wants to unmute and ask any questions about programming or the content that we shared here today. And here is an actual picture of Webby and myself with my mullet at 6 years old when she got big enough and strong enough, and we literally dropped her off at the farm and she was able to be with duck friends swimming in a pond. Isn't that precious? Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the chats. Okay, so for those of you who are saying goodbye, thank you so much. For those of you who are sticking around, please feel free to turn on your video if you want to talk a little bit. Yes, enjoy exploring the links that we'll send in the email. And I will pull up this slide here of the certification program. So this program became really exciting to me. I mentioned I've certified 60 professionals, but last year, one of our state agencies that does kids' mental health and school services, especially for those who have neurodiversity, they work with 10,000 families a year, and we signed a partnership agreement for them to train some of their therapists so that they can work with a number of families a year, teaching them this curriculum. And so if you're somebody who loves working with kids but needs some concrete tools to guide parents, this might be for you. So I'll put this link in the chat box so that you can see it bigger if you would like to. So ultimately, how this certification training works is it's a year long of support. So it's not just like learn the tools and fly on your own. I think we need a village as well when we're groundbreaking and passionate about parents. And so if you want to become a confident guide, what you learn in the first phase of training that starts in March is you learn the 8 pillars of parenting. We go through one per week, and I teach you the arc of the class. So when you start with something like calm the fire in class 1, where do parents put up roadblocks? Oftentimes unconsciously. What tend to be windows of light that you can use as breakthrough moments for them so they shift their behavior? Because any parent you ask, I mean, maybe not any parent, but the majority of parents you ask, they know not to yell, they know not to hurt, they know not to lock their kid in the room. And yet, when they learn about fire in the brain, it's not about like, here's the tool for your kid. It's like, here's the tool for you. It's going to influence your kid. So I want to talk to you about the arc of the class, and that's what we do in the first 10 weeks. So that's about March through the end of May would be our 10 weeks of going through that. And then what you learn is you learn a simple framework based on my life coach training. I used to certify parent coaches. And so I've created 6 categories for positive communication, that if you want to have a breakthrough with parents, it's not just about teaching tools, but it's about listening. Noticing what they're not saying and reading between the lines, asking powerful questions, acknowledging how they're feeling, because if we want them to acknowledge their kids' feelings, did anybody acknowledge their feelings when they were growing up? Is anybody creating space for them to express how hard it feels for them right now? And then you get really good at articulating the concepts, being their champion, and empowering them with simple action steps. So when you master the parent tools in the first phase, then in the next phase, when you learn the positive communication template, you also begin guiding your own pilot parenting group. You can do this on site at a school if you work there, a child care center. You can talk to the occupational therapy clinic in your neighborhood. The ones that I talked to, I was talking to one just over the border in Wisconsin the other day, and they said they have 21 practitioners and they have 100 kid waiting list. And they said it's not sensory needs, it's not communication disorders, a lot of it's mental health and behaviors. And so they're hoping that some of the sensory work will help calm that, so that there's better self-control. So you would guide your pilot parenting group complete with the facilitator guide and the slides of here's how you teach the material, here's the small group breakout work you do, here's how you customize it, here's some FAQs. You would guide your group, and instead of meeting every week like we do in phase 1 when you're mastering the tools, we meet twice a month. Then we can do case studies, you can learn communication tools, you learn group dynamics. We do a lot of troubleshooting together. And then what happens is you submit your certification application. So come, 6 months from your start date of March, so that'd be about September, you submit your application to get certified. And you can earn clock hours of professional development for this home program. We put you in our online directory. And then if you wanted to continue to become an actual certified parent coach to work one-on-one, not just in groups, we can talk about a practicum experience that I can offer you after that. Or we could talk about building your practice. I have an online program for that as well. And then the remaining 6 months of the program is twice a month support. So anybody who's seasoned as a Mad to Glad certified professional, they attend these calls. So you hear from them what's working. You get encouragement. You get to be in a community. And this is important to me because I don't like learning on my own anymore. I want other heart-driven, passionate, impactful professionals who I'm growing with and learning with. And what you learn is when you're a parent or you're a grandparent yourself, you use these tools in your life with your kids, with your significant other, with your extended family. And so it's a really vulnerable and beautiful growth community that I hope you create friends for life. So the cost of this program is $3,850, and we have payment plans. So if this sounds like something you're interested in, I really priced it somewhere in the parent coach certification range. because in the US, it ranges from about 4K to 11K. And I wanted this to be accessible. You know, a lot of people are running groups for something like 50 bucks a class. So a parent, maybe they'll pay 400, but it's up to you if you want to discount that or charge more. But if you're charging that average price, by the time you have, it's like 9.6 families signed up, you get the return on your certification investment. And it's less than the fee of parent coach certification. It gives you the ability to work in group setting. And if somebody wants to work one-on-one with you after that, because you want another way of providing for your family financially, you can. So I'm happy to talk about all of those things. It's really what I've devoted my life to. So you've seen this parenting curriculum here. And if you have questions, now is the time to type them into the chat box. I saw one come through here privately that I can comment on. And you're wondering, is our parenting groups covered by insurance? It's really interesting. I am a private pay business, and parent coaching itself is covered by something like flex spending or HSA accounts here in the US. And the current professionals who are in my certification cohort, who are OTs, therapists, there's a pediatrician, there are mental health professionals, there's a variety of options. So some people are choosing to do private pay for simplicity. They just hand the parent workbook and they come in and attend class for 8 weeks. And others, like this organization for children's behavioral health and like specialty school settings, they have grants that support their nonprofit agency. And so their families come in, and MA, which is an insurance category, covers any therapy services. And because the therapist is running the group, they're allowed to use this grant to cover parents' program, and the parents don't end up paying out of pocket. So I know there's really a variety from out of pocket to grants covering it. I know that if a child has a waiver because of an autism diagnosis, they can use that waiver funding to go through my program, and that schools have grants as well. They often don't have a strong bucket for parent education, but once you start changing this and understanding that this helps with social emotional skills so that things are improving at home in order to influence how kids are doing during their school days when they arrive on campus, people are getting creative with writing grants and getting funding for that as well. All right. So you are welcome for the information. Thank you so much for attending. I will answer this last question. I hear you, Roseanne. So what to do with a child who is so controlling with another friend? Do you want to unmute? Do you want to talk about it briefly here? And I'm going to stop the recording. And for those of you who are leaving, goodbye. And if you wanted to talk to me about anything beyond what you see in email or on my website, you can email me hello@samanthamo.com, and we can set up a complimentary 30-minute phone call. All right, looking forward to seeing you in class.